Welcome to Laguna Woods Stories, the program where we meet interesting people. And today we have a very interesting person and also a very important person if you live in Laguna Woods Village. This is Siobhan Foster, who is the CEO of VMS Inc. And we'll talk a little bit about the alphabet soup a little bit later. But Siobhan, let's start by learning a little bit about your name.
Okay.
I looked it up, and you of course know that it's Irish. And how did you come to have an Irish name?
My parents traveled a lot before I was born, and they came across an actress, Siobhan McKenna, and they fell in love with the name. And I think they actually met her one time in London, and so it stuck with them.
I see. So are you Irish?
From one side of my family, yes,
okay.
I am. And
yeah.
all my brothers and sisters have similarly Irish names.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I also have a name that's difficult to pronounce. My middle name is Welsh, and it's been anglicized as Llewellyn, but I can't pronounce it in Welsh because it has a sound that we don't have in English, so I can't say the double L Welsh sound. So I imagine that over the years you've both loved and hated a name that sometimes isn't said the way it looks.
Yes, I dreaded the first day of school my entire life because you're always the one that the teacher wants to call on and can't pronounce your name, and then you're embarrassed the first day of school.
Oh dear, yeah.
I was shy to begin with, and then with that, it just...
Yeah, so that didn't help. Where were you born, and where did you start life's journey?
Sure, I was born and raised my entire childhood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a suburb outside of Pittsburgh. So.
Okay. The western side of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Beautiful country. You understand why it was called a Sylvan area anyway.
Yes.
Sylvania. So, and how did you happen to come to California?
Oh, that's a long story, but I grew up in a small community outside of Pittsburgh, and I was always fascinated about it. Was called a borough there, not a city, not a township, but a borough.
Okay.
And I was always fascinated about how the borough worked. Who drove those snow plows at 3 a.m. on the snowy morning, and how did they figure out that your street was supposed to get paved in the summer? And we had a volunteer fire department. We didn't have a professional fire department, so I always thought about those men and women who devoted all their free time to providing fire protection for the borough. So it just always fascinated me, and I figured...
Really?
This was my calling. I was going to work in a city somehow. I didn't quite know what city management was at the time, but just the intricacies of all that fascinated me. So
very, very interesting. Did you study something related to this when you went to college?
Yes, I went to college in Chicago. I went to Lake Forest College. It's north of Chicago.
Okay.
And one of their majors in the politics department, they called it politics, not political science, was urban studies. So I majored in politics, but had a concentration, if you will, in urban studies. So I learned all about cities, from architecture to urban economies, all the different facets of a city. So that was kind of interesting. So that drew me to Lake Forest College. And then when I was there, I was able to complete 2 internships for local government, one in Illinois and one back in my home state of Pennsylvania during the summer. And it just continued to fuel my interest in cities. For instance, I did a pavement inventory project one summer where I walked every street in the town that I was working for, and you diagrammed, where the cracks were, where there were potholes, and so forth. So then when they had their capital outlay budget prepared, they knew what streets needed to be paved that year or which streets could wait farther out. Just fascinating to me.
So as a child, you were interested in this sort of thing, and you carried that interest forward. I mean, a lot of times as a child, I wanted to be a cowboy or something like that. I wasn't very sophisticated, but as a child, you got interested in city government, and you carried that interest through your college.
And then from there, if I could go on, I went to graduate school because I was told from one of the city managers that I interned for that you needed a master's degree in public administration as kind of the next step into the profession of city management or local government management. So I went to the University of Kansas.
Oh, really?
Which was the preeminent school for city managers at that time.
Okay.
So.
All right. Huh. And then I suppose you must have been snapped up by some municipality, and did you go right into city government after you graduated?
Well, as part of our program, you then had to work a year for a local government to kind of provide...
In Kansas?
Well, you could work anywhere.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And back then, many of the larger cities had kind of competitions to hire people like me who had the education but still needed the more practical experience. So I was selected to work with the city of Riverside in Southern California. And so that's where my career was born.
That's how you got to Southern California.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you worked in the city of Riverside for some time, or
yeah, so I was able to spend 20 years with the city of Riverside, progressing through the ranks. Given it's a city of 300 and some thousand people, a large organization, I was able to continually move up in the organization. So I started again as an intern that first year, working for the city manager on special projects. For instance, I looked at the fire department and what was the best way to staff a fire department, because they had a constant staffing requirement. You always needed firefighters on duty. So was it cheaper to just hire our existing employees on overtime, or was it better to hire new employees so you had a constant source of employees? Things like that. So that's how I spent my first year. And then I promoted into our budget office and was very involved in the city budget process, and in fact ended up being the citywide budget coordinator, $400 million budgets for several years. So that gave me a great foundation on understanding budgets, finance, accounting, and so forth.
Yeah.
And then,
well, it seems like everything in your life was pretty much a straight line in one direction. There must have been some setbacks or some difficulties along the way.
Oh, sure. My next career stop, again, in the city of Riverside was Public Works Director, where I ran their Public Works Department. So that's where I started to have some challenges. Being a woman in a primarily male-dominated department was different. It was different for me. It was different for the employees. But we learned, that our differences made us stronger. So, so I spent almost 8 years as either the director or the deputy director of Public Works. And
it took them a while to discover that you were competent, even though you were a woman.
Exactly, and very organized, and respected them, and they respected me, and it worked out incredibly well.
Yeah. And did you go then from Riverside to Laguna Woods, or?
No, there were a couple stops along the way. So the last thing I did in Riverside, we had a project called the Riverside Renaissance, where we were able to put together almost $1 billion worth of dollars to improve our infrastructure. So as a public works director, I was able to help build freeway interchanges. We redid a regional wastewater quality plant that now produces very high quality recycled water, which is kind of a cutting edge for our times.
Because the river that Riverside is named for is not much of a source of reliable water, I guess.
Correct. But so I built more than $500 million worth of projects in the last 3 years of my career there.
Wow.
So once I had done that, it was time to pursue other opportunities, and that's what I did. I went on to be a public works director in 2 other California cities before I came to Laguna Woods.
Okay. How'd you happen to come to Laguna Woods? I mean, this is city-like, I suppose, but not a city.
I had spent, again, 2 10 years as a public works director in Southern California, and I was looking for my next opportunity. And again, I was thinking, well, I'm ready to be a city manager or help run an organization. I had significant municipal experience, had the budgeting experience, had the operational experience, knew how to build and sustain relationships with our residents. So I was ready to take that next step, and I saw this advertisement for what was then the chief operating officer of Laguna Woods Village, and I said, you're not in charge, but you would be the next person in the organization. And I came out and visited the community as best I could, from the outsides and where I could see, and I just a fascinating community, all the wonderful amenities. It sounded as though the residents were very involved, which I like. I think that leads to the best governance, if you will. And then the location's phenomenal. And so I applied, and here I am.
The weather's a little bit more agreeable than the Inland Empire, as they call it.
Yes.
Yeah. So you came as a COO, is that what you call it?
Yes,
yeah.
That is correct.
So Chief Operations Officer.
Right.
And how is that responsibility different than your current responsibility?
As COO, I was much more involved in the daily operations of the various departments and the various services that we provide to the community. I was generally the first point of contact if something needed to be done or went wrong or so forth. While the CEO, I think, even back then, was more focused on the governance side of the equation. What policies are the boards setting? How do we then implement those policies as the management company for the 3 corporations that we work for?
Yeah. Maybe this is a good time to clarify in people's thinking what organization you actually work for and how that relates to the whole government structure, because I think it took me 5 years after I moved here to kind of get a drift of what all these various alphabets to organizations are. So you work for?
I work for Village Management Services, and that is the management company for the 2 housing mutuals, Third and United, as well as GRF, who is obviously responsible for the amenities and more of the recreational activities in our community. And my understanding is that the 3 corporations that I just mentioned decided they wanted to be self-managed and created Village Management Services to provide that management. And so Village Management Services is a creation of the 3 corporations, United, Third, and GRF.
So United and Third are housing corporations in a sense. They manage the housing, and then the Golden Rain Foundation, GRF, is over all the amenities and the roads and
some of the common areas. It just depends, but yes, definitely the amenities and the services provided within those facilities.
And these 3 corporations are run by boards that are elected by the people here.
That is correct.
By us.
Yes.
But they don't actually do anything other than pass resolutions and that sort of thing, right? They don't have a staff to accomplish anything.
Correct. They set their policies. This is what we want accomplished, and then they turn and look at Village Management Services to implement those policies.
Right.
So we have a very close working relationship, yet they are the policymakers and we are the implementers.
So it's not exactly the same as the United States government, but you have the legislative branch, which are the 3 corporations, and then the executive branch, which actually does things.
That's a good analogy, actually, Tom. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Good. And so you work for Village Management Incorporated, VMI, and they are also a corporation, right?
Correct, with their own board of directors. And that board of directors is appointed by each of the three corporations, United Third and.
So VMS was a creation of the other corporations.
That is correct.
But it's now a separate corporation, and then they hire the staff that runs the whole place, starting with you.
They hire me, and then it's my responsibility to hire the staff. Yes.
So you came in as COO.
Correct.
And you were in that position for how long?
The first CEO left shortly after I started, so I was an interim CEO for a while until they hired Jeff Parker, who retired.
I didn't realize that you were.
Yeah, Brad Hudson was the first CEO that I worked for. He left about 6 months after I started.
I see.
So I served as an interim CEO until Jeff Parker was hired. And Jeff retired last February. Yeah. And so that's when I was appointed CEO.
And they looked around everywhere to find the right CEO, and they found you right there. So, how is your responsibility as CEO different from COO now?
I think the most important thing is that I'm primarily responsible for the relationships with the board members and understanding what their needs are, what their policies are, and then turning to my staff to make sure that those are implemented to the best of our capabilities. Right. So again, focusing more on the governance side of the picture and relying on our fine staff to implement that policy.
Yeah, because if the other corporations pass policies that you have to live with, you need to have an oar in the water, so to speak, to steer it in a direction that will be possible to do, right?
Exactly. And we have a very good relationship with the boards, so that makes it easier.
That's excellent. We have moved your career forward, and without finding out much about you as a person. You have a family?
Yes, I do, and we have 2 adult children. So they're kind of the pride and joy, if you will.
I bet. Where are they?
They're both fortunately in Southern California. Both have finished their studies and ended up staying here.
Okay.
The oldest daughter is a research optometrist, so she's an optometrist, but has elected to stay on the research side. So she just finished a clinical trial on a glaucoma treatment, which is kind of fascinating. And then our youngest daughter works for the National Football League and works in their social media department. So very sports oriented.
Good. Are you sports oriented?
Oh, I love sports. Yes, I love sports. I'm a fanatic, if you would.
Yeah. Now you come from Pennsylvania. You've lived in California. What teams do you support?
Well, I brought my Pittsburgh teams with me. I grew up in Pittsburgh when the Steelers won 4 or 5 Super Bowls. So I'm a diehard Pittsburgh Steeler fan and a Pittsburgh Penguin fan. My husband and I were married in Pittsburgh the night they won their first Stanley Cup. So it was something I'll always remember. So I brought those allegiances with me. But then we've adopted other ones along the way. When I was at the University of Kansas, they won the national NCAA basketball championship that year. So I'm a big Jayhawk basketball fan now. And then living in California, we've kind of adopted the Angels and the Ducks. And now the Rams, now that my daughter works right next to the stadium. So.
You don't have much choice there, right?
So we go to all the games. And
any grandchildren yet?
No.
Well, your life will change when that happens.
I'm sure
at least mine did when my daughter had some children.
What a blessing, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that you're a dog person.
Yes, we have 2 miniature dachshunds. One is named McVay, after Sean McVay, the Los Angeles Rams coach.
Oh, okay.
And then the other one is named Hines, named after, there was a Steeler player, Hines Ward, and then the stadium where the Steelers play used to be called Heinz Field after the ketchup. So they harken back to sports teams.
Yeah, right. So your sports goes through and through.
Yes, but they are kind of my people right now since we have an empty nest.
So you've lived in California now long enough that if you retire, will you move back to Pennsylvania, or you think you're stuck here in California?
I think I'm probably a Californian, especially if that's where the children end up residing in the future generations.
Yeah. Over the years, you've been involved in a lot of different opportunities to make a difference.
Yes.
What are some of the projects that you're most proud of?
In the village itself?
Well, in the village, or let's start outside the village if you want to, and I mean this field that you've chosen to work in is one with lots of needs but lots of opportunities to change things. So what has pleased you over the years?
Well, again, in Riverside, I mentioned just having that unique opportunity to build and have the funding to build so many projects in such a condensed period of time. So again, the Riverside Renaissance is something I'll always be proud of. And you'll see it anytime you go to the city.
Yes, I have driven through there many times. So.
But then also in Riverside, a real focus was getting back to being connected with our residents, making sure that the services we provide connect to the needs of our residents. And so we focused extensively on that. When I was there, we implemented a 24-hour pothole repair program.
Wow.
So, if it rains, it tears up the streets, and then everyone calls to have their potholes filled. Well, that's a huge need. You don't want a pothole in front of your house or on your way to drop the kids off at school. So we implemented 24-hour pothole repair. Graffiti was an emerging problem at that time. We implemented 12-hour graffiti removal because no one wants to see graffiti in their neighborhoods.
Right.
So that type of thing. We listened to our residents and implemented what we could to assist them. So that was just fascinating.
A 24-hour pothole repair is like amazing to me. They tend to go on and just get worse and worse. So I imagine that like a tooth decay or something like that, the quicker you get at it, the less the problem is.
Right, and the residents feel better about their neighborhoods then if they're clean and the roads are in good condition. Yeah. So that's the premise that I've operated on. How can we help our residents with the needs that are most important and critical to them?
Most visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then if I talk about some of the other cities I worked for, I ran a water utility for the city of Covina. So, given the drought and the water resources in the state of California, that was a great education for me. Learned so much about the crisis and strategies and so forth. So that's just great knowledge that I now have.
That would all be new to somebody coming from Pennsylvania, where I imagine there's plenty of water.
Exactly. So that was neat. And then I worked for the city of Pasadena and helping to put on the Rose Parade.
You got a front row seat to the Rose Parade.
Yes,
probably.
But Public Works is in the middle of it. All the infrastructure needs for the parade. So that was just...
Well, that must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was neat. And then we were responsible for the Rose Bowl Stadium. So making
really?
sure the lights stayed on, if you will, and all the infrastructure and operations behind the scenes. So that was just an incredible experience. So those are some of the highlights.
It does sound like a lot of fun.
Yes.
What are some of the things you're most proud of as you've been here in the village for several years now?
Well, if I can focus on my current role,
yes.
I implemented a reorganization when I started in the CEO's office, with our focus being a commitment to excellence and a dedication to service.
Now, those are words that are not very surprising. I would guess that every CEO probably has that as a goal. So, what did you do that was different than what had been done before?
Sure. So we were coming out of the pandemic. When I came on board, we had employees working remotely and so forth. So we just kind of doubled down, if you will. We met with all of our employees, and that's a big undertaking, just to kind of share our message. And by our, I mean Carlos Rojas is now serving as the Director of Operations, having left the Security Director role. And Catherine Laster, who has worked in the CEO's office, is now our Manager of services. So she's takes care of a lot of the administration and governance piece of the puzzle, and Carlos is focusing on operations. So we've just made a commitment to work with our staff to just keep that guiding principle at the forefront of their minds, and just make sure that we're providing the best possible services to our residents. And that's been a focus. And I think we've been pretty successful in the, I don't know how many months it's been now, 9 or 10 months that I've been CEO.
Wow, yeah, that's short. But I think I saw you on television talking about measurable or you know, that you want to have tangible, measurable results on these policies.
That's correct. And in fact, we just had a meeting this morning with some board members on what are our measurements going to be for the next year, 2023.
And what kind of things do you measure?
If we look at resident services, for instance, the hold time when you call resident services to report a problem or request a service.
Right.
Similarly, the walk-in time when you go to resident services to have something taken care of.
I had the experience yesterday, I think it was, that some sprinklers had been broken just outside my unit, and we called resident services, and it was fixed that day.
That's great.
So,
well, there you go.
So I was stunned, actually. I was going to take a better look at what the problem was and call again, and it was fixed.
Excellent, excellent.
So congratulations, something is working.
Well, that's
apparently.
our wonderful staff. We have a really committed staff, and I know we're a little short-staffed right now, but again, an incredibly committed group of employees.
That's been an ongoing problem, not just here, but everywhere, I think. I keep hearing about the shortage of staff. What causes that, do you think?
I think it's probably multifaceted, but the pandemic, I think, created I don't know if you call it a generation of workers who got comfortable working remotely. So you have some employees who now just want to work from home and not have to come into an office or a work environment every day. And then, again, some people probably decided they didn't want to return to work after the pandemic. Maybe they lost their job and found something else, or decided to stay home. I think it's just a culmination of
So it's been a struggle to find good workers, I guess, not just for us here, but making good progress in that, I presume.
We certainly have dedicated staff and dedicated our efforts to that.
Yeah. We're almost out of time, but what do you see in the near future? What are your kind of goals that you'd like to see happen?
A huge focus is cost reductions, cost containment. We realize that everything that we do that costs money impacts our residents in terms of their assessments. Recently, we've identified more than $1.5 million worth of savings, and have started to implement that.
Yay for you!
So, yay for the team, but we're cognizant that what we do impacts our residents, and we have to be mindful of that. So we're trying to be as cost competitive as we can and as efficient as we can, and so that's the focus going into 2023.
Well, we wish you all the best because we have a vested interest in your success, and it seems like you have hit the ground running. You really knew the place before you started as the CEO, and so all the best, and thanks for coming in and chatting with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
Our guest has been Siobhan Foster, who is the CEO of VMS.